Hello, everybody. Hello, Tyler. Oh, man, it's so great to hear everybody. Welcome back in the car for another Requel pitch. Today, I'll be tackling BrightBurn. That's right. BrightBurn, that 2019 film that was released, produced by James Gunn, written by James Gunn's other brother, that every podcast has talked about. But over on Krypton Report, we did do this last year. And I kind of waited a little bit to do this because I was thinking about it and when to drop this. We did it as a commentary for a crossover between James's Horror Report and our usual Krypton Report monthly film Patreon. And I feel like BrightBurn's a movie that's kind of re-caught on recently with James Gunn being announced as the director, writer of Superman. Now, BrightBurn is an interesting film because it takes two popular genres, horror and the comic book. Well, now I'll use the term superhero as kind of a blanket trope, even though it's not really about a superhero as much as about supervillain, and blends them together. And I feel that it was very much modeled in the style of Man of Steel. The trailer, very Man of Steel vibes. And you could tell exactly what it was doing. And that's okay. Recently we've seen this trend of taking horror or taking movie plots and been putting a horror twist on them. It's a Wonderful Knife, which could have been a much better film than it was. Freaky, which I thought was great, which is like Freaky Friday, but with a serial killer twist. The one that is on Amazon, like Killer Time or Killer, I can't think of it right now, but it's basically Back to the Future with a serial killer slasher. And BrightBurn was ahead of that kind of trend of mashing genres and stories. So the idea of basically making this evil Superman trope is great. Now, over on Krypton Report, we've had a lot of discussions about our hatred towards the tropes of making Superman evil. But I think it really can work and mean something when you do these type of stories of BrightBurn and of like Homelander, where they all, or I would say Omni-Man, but I finished the comics and there's a nice arc to Omni-Man. There's the Superman archetype that you kind of realize that, oh, that's much like Superman, without corrupting the image of Superman himself. Because there's a lot of people have this love of corrupting the incorruptible and seeing our heroes fall. BrightBurn is interesting because, there's certain tropes of the superhero film, and then there's certain tropes of a horror film. And it definitely leans into the tropes and the pacing and the style of a horror film more than your superhero film. So it falls into like a supernatural style horror film. It's like a tight 90-some minute film. And the budget was low, but it accomplishes a lot with that limited budget. And I think for any horror lover, it's an interesting film to take on. Now, the first film was received well. It did well. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me. And I wonder, had we not fallen into COVID and everything, if we would have seen some sort of sequel emerge from this film. But we didn't. And that sucks. Because the film ends with our character of Brandon Breyer. So first of all, we have the double iterations of the B's of his name. Even the city, BrightBurn. So we're falling into superhero and comic book tropes. Great. But then the film ends where these other reports of like evil, you have this kind of newscaster person talking about other sightings and discussions of these creature, people, evil, doing things. And it sets up this idea of, for lack of a better term, an evilized Justice League, which is interesting when you're not actually using the exact characters. We've seen this kind of thing, especially if you've explored the comics of The Boys. I mean, I know that in comics themselves, we have the Earth 3, which is the crime syndicate, which are the evil Justice Leaguers, so to speak. So, I know that's been done. And my idea for a pitch is you now have this world for BrightBurn 2 that lives in fear of these evil, godlike figures. And you kind of jump ahead a little bit, because you want to keep the same kid as Brandon. Of course, he's grown because puberty and life. And he's a man now, young adult. And what that fear does to the world and where the world is, does he just destroy? Is he political? Are these evil creatures working as a team? I think not. But I like to insert the idea of a monster hunter, right? This kind of idea that almost a Van Helsing-like person who starts researching. You have this group, government body, maybe it's the world governments, creating this specialized team research division that's trying to study these to actually hunt them down and kill them and fight back. So now you've created this universe, almost Monsterverse type thing, because you have this evil team of super powered villains. And what does that look like when they start dominating the world? And like I said, is it just raw chaos? So the story, I think, would be interesting if you have someone trying to hunt down, and you can introduce your other, like you do your evil Aquaman. I think that would be an interesting one. Okay? And in there, you can tell the origin of how your main protagonist, Hunter, is born. Like, he was a child in the attack. His parents all died, and you're kind of reversing the script, much like, think about Aquaman the film, where Black Manta is born. But the only difference is now we are on the side of the quote-unquote Black Manta. And, that film ends with the good guy kind of triumphing over evil and destroying the evil Aquaman, Sea King, whatever, they try to name him. But then decides that he's going to go on and try to hunt these others. And you could do individual films, or you could start to kind of have these. I mean, I don't think it needs to be an ongoing universe, but you could get a good 3 to 4 films out of this kind of universe, with the idea that, you circle back around, you have your BrightBurn character. And I think the idea of a boy who never really matures past boy, who's just pure rage and anger and, doesn't have the cognitive to really be the leader or ruler. And you could do something, because they make the in the classroom scene in BrightBurn, they discuss the idea of insects and planting in the nest, and then the taking over the nest when it's like basically activated. And that's what happens to Brandon. He's basically activated and starts his pre-biological programming, so to speak. And you could do something where maybe there's a hive-mindedness in Brandon, and the hive is connecting him as they're coming to the planet, or they send more people to the planet, or something like that. And your last film is more of that kind of battle. But at the same time, I don't think it needs to be grandiose, like keeping that smaller scale horror film, and make, like I said, in-universe connective story. Do your individual films, for the different archetypal characters that are set up at the end. You know, the fun thing about BrightBurn is it does become, because it is produced by James Gunn, and now it's a who's who of James Gunn people, with many of them going on to be in DC projects. But what would your thoughts be on a sequel to BrightBurn? Would you want it to be just the branding character? Would you want to see more of the world? Would you want to see these other characters? Or should the sequels all just be these other archetypes and how they are? And then they're just kind of connected because you get the sense they're in the same world. And we don't ever see more than one villain. What are your thoughts? Let me know. Jtypatrick at Gmail. Leave a comment here. And take care, all right?